pretty impressive seeing just how far the Hellraiser franchise has come. The last Hellraiser movie we had actually came out a few years ago on Hulu. There's one person about all three that, if you're going to talk about one Pinhead performance, it would probably be from this movie. Now, before I even get into Hellraiser Judgment, I'd just like to say, nobody, and I mean nobody, comes close to what Doug Bradley is to Pinhead. I think most people would agree that Doug Bradley to Pinhead is basically what Robert Englund is to Freddy Krueger. Look, nothing against Jackie Earle Haley, but yeah, right. Nobody can touch Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, and nobody can touch Doug Bradley as Pinhead. But if we're going to talk about one movie in the latter part of the Hellraiser franchise, boy, Hellraiser Judgment is the one. Let's get into it. Okay, guys, so Turbine Media put out this 4K release of Hellraiser Judgment, a movie that I watched when I had the opportunity to interview the director and makeup guy, Gary Tunnicliffe, to be able to talk to him about the movie. Now, to be honest with you, when I watched Hellraiser Judgment a few years ago, I wasn't that excited. Let's keep in mind the movie before this that came out was a movie called Hellraiser Revelations. This is considered to be one of the worst horror movies ever made. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, and maybe it's not. You be the judge. We all call that the Great Value Pinhead. Hellraiser Judgment was a movie that, honestly, when you talk about the latter part of the Hellraiser films, or really anything after Part 4, if you're going to talk about which any of those are good, boy, Hellraiser Judgment comes right to mind for me. I was really excited to be able to own this. But let's talk about Hellraiser Judgment in just a very brief sense, because my money says a lot of you watching this may not have seen this movie before. I could be wrong, but just to be safe, I'm going to keep it fairly spoiler-free. So the movie Hellraiser Judgment is kind of like some of the other latter sequels when it comes to money. Not a whole lot of it, but we do have Gary J. Tunnicliffe. Now, if you're not familiar with the name Gary J. Tunnicliffe, Gary got involved in the makeup effects as early as Part 3, and he had been involved with the Hellraiser films basically from that point on. He was offered to write and work on Hellraiser Revelations and did an early treatment, but the movie got bastardized and got way cheaper than anticipated. Gary claimed he watched Hellraiser Revelations after that and basically just cried in pain. He loves the series so much as we do as fans. So after this, Gary made a small home movie basically of a Hellraiser sequence that garnered a lot of attention, so much that Dimension even bought it. They put it on one of the DVDs of one of the older Hellraiser films. Not too long after that, Hellraiser Judgment became a reality. Gary J. Tunnicliffe was in charge of the next Hellraiser movie. Now, on a budget of $350,000, you may not expect much. In the beginning of Hellraiser Judgment, we take the term judgment almost to a literal sense. We see this guy go into this old abandoned house. And one thing you'll notice about this movie is, style-wise, everything is extremely contrasted. All the lights are really harsh. The look of the movie is very just brash. And I really think that was done as a design to try to elevate the production value, given that this movie is basically a micro-budgeted film. But we see this guy go into this room where we see this really interesting looking character. Now, the character I want to talk to you guys about is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best character from this movie. I'm talking about the Auditor. Now, the Auditor is this really interesting character that sits behind this desk and basically tells his victim, okay, tell me the things that you have done. And before too long, this person starts throwing out all their horrible sins that they've done in life. You find out that this is not a good person that's in this chair tied up talking to the Auditor. This is a bad human being. And the Auditor has this really interesting sensibility to him. He almost talks to them as if he's at a bank trying to get their information about, you know, how to open up a new account or something. We're then led to see a sequence that is extremely weird and disturbing. After the Auditor has written up all this guy's sins on a piece of paper, this other guy comes in and basically eats all the paper with all the words written on it, barfs it up into this cone, and then it goes down into a drain where we see three women that are topless, but their faces are completely demolished, and they put their hands into the filter where all this crap came out of the guy's throw up of the paper, and then they feel it and then decide if this guy is guilty or not guilty. And when the guy in the beginning of the movie is guilty, this creepy looking guy in this complete overhauled black suit has these ninja swords and just chops this guy up. That's the opening to Hellraiser Judgment. So this movie has this real sensibility of judgment, of afterlife, if you will. Like, when you're dead, are you going to heaven? Are you going to hell? And you're going to get what's coming to you. So it's a really interesting premise for Hellraiser Judgment. The thing to note about this movie is Pinhead is treated as like a main event character. You don't see Pinhead a whole lot through the movie, but the difference here is it's not because of those other Hellraiser movies where it was just a random script where they tried to shoehorn Pinhead in. You could definitely tell this was done as more as a stylistic thing, because this was a Hellraiser film from the start. So the interesting thing about Judgment is, like I said, nobody can replace Doug Bradley, but the performance and the look of Pinhead in this movie compared to Revelations in the 2018 movie, this is my favorite. I liked Pinhead in this movie, and he has a little bit of a different kind of layer to his character. That part I'll keep spoiler-free. All in all, guys, Hellraiser Judgment is not an amazing film, but what's impressive is, in my opinion, it's a legitimately good movie. After the first 4 Hellraisers, I want to go to Hellraiser Judgment as the next best one. And to see somebody like Gary, who's been involved with the movies from Part 3, make this, you can tell it was done by somebody who loves Hellraiser. The vibe and feel of this movie is unequivocally Hellraiser. So when it comes to this release, there's a couple of variants that Turbine put out. There's one that has basically the standard style poster that we saw for the movie, and then there's this one. This is this really cool blood red one that I saw that I really like. Now, I actually thought when I bought this that it was going to be a media book, but instead this is actually a slipcase, and this is a steel book inside. So the slipcase comes out, and we're greeted to this gorgeous steel book, Hellraiser Judgment. And while all the classic Cenobites aren't represented in the film, we do get the Great Chatterer in here. This is the Auditor, and this is actually played by Gary Tunnicliffe himself, which makes it even cooler. He was great as the Auditor. So I really like the Steelbook. Now this is a 4K UHD release, and it comes with 3 discs. We've got the movie on 4K right here, the movie on Blu-ray, and the special features disc. Now, the special features disc is where this release really shines, because the guy who made this, Gary, held no punches about what happened behind the scenes and why Doug Bradley wasn't in it. But we're going to get into that in just a second. Now, I didn't own Hellraiser Judgment at all before this release, so I have nothing to compare it to besides maybe the Tubi stream that I watched a couple years ago, or Amazon Prime, wherever it was. But in terms of picture quality, I thought that this release looked really good. The level of sharpness to this was fantastic, and because of the high contrast look and style that he went with, it was just elevated, I felt, by the HDR and everything. It was just a great viewing experience on 4K. All the Cenobites and the Auditor looked really good, and the makeup design being done by Gary, who that's his forte, just shined. This also had some great audio options, including a 7.1 mix, which the movie rocked the house in terms of audio. I had the soundbar cranked up, and it was fantastic. Picture quality and audio quality both get solid 9 out of 10s to me. Another thing I want to note too is when I put the special features disc in here, which is a Blu-ray disc, it played perfectly fine on my American 4K player. So it looks like this release is actually region-free too. So obviously the 4K disc is natively region-free, but the Blu-rays seem to play just fine as well, which is great because the special features on this were incredible. Now this release included this complete making of from inception of the movie all the way through to production and afterwards, including the cast of the movie, which included people like Heather Langenkamp in here, who played a creepy old lady in this movie. But the real money is the interviews with Gary J. Tunnicliffe. Now Gary did a brand new interview for this, and he talked all about what happened with Doug Bradley. And it's really sad because this movie seemed to have cost them his friendship. Now, I'll just say this because I don't know if any of you guys are going to want to pick this up or not, so I'll just tell you what he said. They offered him the role. Gary wanted him to do the movie, but because it was a small budget movie, he said that Doug Bradley felt like this is only a rights movie to keep the rights into the Dimension home, which technically is true, but in Gary's defense, there was a new wave of executives at Dimension that said, hey, we know Revelations would scrap. We actually want to make a good movie this time. So they kind of had some back and forth, and ultimately Doug said he didn't want to do it. And then to Gary's dismay, after the movie came out, Doug said that he wished Gary would have fought for him more to be in the movie. Gary was taken aback by that because that's not what they talked about beforehand, and so Gary defended himself by apparently releasing some emails of what Doug said, and that just made things a whole lot worse. Also to note, Gary also added that to send Doug Bradley the script for the movie, he needed to sign a non-disclosure, and Doug refused to sign an NDA, so that's another thing where things went south. Ultimately, it was really sad because Gary didn't hold anything back in terms of what happened from his side and talked about it in the documentary, even going as far as saying, we're no longer friends and it sucks. So what a bittersweet movie. We actually got a decent Hellraiser sequel, but it cost Doug his friendship with Gary, who'd been friends with since 1992. Guys, if any of you are watching this, bury the hatchet. Life is short. We'd love to see both of you guys work on another Hellraiser movie again. Please. Overall, guys, I gotta say, I'm really happy that I picked this up. I got this from Diabolic DVD, and even though this variant is gone, they still had the variant that had the American movie poster on the front, which, believe me, looked just as good. Just, I like the red. But listen, above all else, go on Amazon, and if you want to just get the movie to own it, go get the Blu-ray from America. I believe that should still be available for a very, very cheap price. But if you're so inclined to want to pick this up on 4K, I thought it looked really good, and you can pick it up from Diabolic DVD. Above all else, Hellraiser Judgment is just a damn good movie. And for a Hellraiser sequel, it's a masterpiece compared to Revelations. So anyway, guys, that's this video on Hellraiser Judgment, the Gary J. Tunnicliffe Hellraiser sequel. Check it out. Huge giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.